cover letter, if you go for CV, cover letter, CV will say, can you do the job? Do you have the necessary skills? The cover letter will be, do you want the job? Why do you want the role? Why do you want to work for this organisation? And then maybe 2 or 3 paragraphs about your key skills.
Welcome back to Future You, the podcast brought to you by graduate careers experts, Prospects. I'm your host, Emily Slade, and this week is another Q&A, and I'm joined by Sally Brown. Hello!
Hi there. Lovely to be here.
Well, it's lovely to have you. Would you like to tell us who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Sally and I'm a careers advisor at UEA. I sort of work with all students if they want to come and see me for one-to-ones, and graduates. I primarily at the minute work with science students and medical students. But yes, all welcome.
Yay, lovely. And you're here today. We're going to basically look, we've got some questions in front of us. The high production value of this Tupperware is filled with questions all about CVs, applications.
The exciting world of CVs.
The thrilling world of CVs. Okay, so some of these have been sent in by our listeners and some of them have not. Okay. So this one has not. What advice do you have for candidates who are looking to work abroad?
Well, that is a good one. I suppose it depends if they are sort of a UK national and wanting to move abroad, or whether they're international already and wanting to go back. So let's assume it's the first one. It's asking for advice, first of all. There's loads of websites out there that gives you a real good breakdown of the job market, because unfortunately every country has a different rule when it comes to writing CVs. No. Some want photos, some not.
Oh, wow.
Some want one page, some not. And even like the layout and what you would put in the sections are all very different. What you would put in a cover letter, style of writing in a cover letter, it's all very different. Some might also want it in like the native language of the country.
Right.
Some, if they're a UK company that happens to be abroad, they might want it in UK format. So there's lots of questions to ask. So how do we find the answers? So yes, a nice Google search will tell you lots of basic stuff.
Cool.
But to be perfectly honest, it's good to start connecting with people who are working in the country that you're intending to work in.
Okay.
So let's say I want to move to Brazil. Hooray. Lovely weather. Compared to what is today, which is a horrible nightmare. But you don't know what it's like. You don't know how to do it. So if you got yourself a LinkedIn account, it's fairly easy and simple. So you could actually look up on your university's alumni page who actually is currently working in Brazil, who's come from your university, or at least come from a UK base. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with just reaching out to them, send a connect and add a note, or if you're super stealthy, be able to find their email address from somewhere and just say, hey, I noticed from LinkedIn that you've done the same course as me or from the same university. I'm really interested and curious about working in Brazil. I was wondering whether you'd spare some time to answer a few of my questions. And they might be able to give you the really logistics in terms of how to apply for visas, what the job market is like, but also what it's actually like day to day living there. How welcoming are the communities? Is there what you want, like a good expat community where, yes, you probably want to make friends and, with people who are native to Brazil, but it's also good to have friends who have been through the similar experiences to you. So it's finding the people. You can ask Google anything, but to be honest, it's actually, lived experiences which are going to be important. But certainly just double checking all the visa, the boring stuff like that, as well as like, hey, which beaches are good?
Which beach is the best? Amazing. Have you yourself ever lived abroad to work abroad?
Oh, I haven't, and I really regretted it. Several times when I was a school teacher for many years, and tempted to go and work internationally because I heard some amazing things.
Like TEFL vibes?
Not necessarily TEFL, but just like working in an international school. But like some places you'd get a free apartment and, free, no tax and things like that. And then, brilliant. But I was never quite brave enough. I got close once. I had an interview and then sort of backed out. This is scary. I also would have had to rehome my cats, which would have been very sad. But but they went anyway at some point. So I'm like, well. But yeah, it's actually, I know lots of people who have worked abroad and then basically never come back.
Yeah.
I think it's a brilliant experience. But you never know down the line.
Exactly.
I might be in Brazil on a beach.
This time next year. Amazing. I love it. This one was sent in by Stephen. He asks, I have a gap in my employment history. How can I explain this to potential employers?
That comes up a few times.
Yeah.
So I suppose, Stephen, is what point we're talking at. So typically on a CV, you would explain very clearly any extended or recent employment gaps. So to be perfectly honest, if we were talking 15 years, 20 years down the line and you took a 3-month break to do something, they're not going to care. I mean, it was so long ago, unless it was something really dodgy that you were doing that.
You were running a back-end casino or something.
But if it was 3 months, like if it was this year and you took a 3-month off, then they would probably spot that and go, what happened there? So it's fairly easy. You can say, as you would with any other experiences, the dates and what you did. Now, it could be something like caring responsibilities or job seeking and networking. That's perfectly okay to say this. This, like when I finished my degree, I didn't have anything to go through, so I spent the 3 months networking and job seeking. That's fine. Or I went travelling. Or I was writing a book, or whatever, but never got published. An awful book, but that's what I was doing. And that's absolutely okay to do so. People are always really nervous about writing about illness, or they feel like ashamed by it. They think that's going to go against me. It's also how you frame it. So perhaps on your CV, it might say illness or maternity leave or caring for someone. When it maybe gets to interview, that's sometimes a good opportunity to discuss it, but in a positive light. Okay. So if I have gone off long-term sick, what did I learn from that experience? How did that make me more resilient? How did it make, if it was a long-term condition, something that's going to be ongoing, what did I learn that helps me explain to my employer what reasonable adjustments I might need? That wouldn't happen again. Maybe it's aggravated by stress. If it was bringing up my children or maternity leave or that sort of type of thing, what extra skills might one gain from that? Maybe, being calm under pressure, organisation skills, conflict management, all these things. So you can always frame it as that, yes, I was doing this, but don't go, I'm sorry, I was doing this. What did you learn from it? Make it a positive. You could even consider like, I was off ill for a bit and now I'm trying to get a job in the NHS. Brilliant. You talk to me about what it's like being from a patient's perspective and how that's increased your empathy. But again, it might be that you have, if it's an extended thing and you think that this is going to look really weird on my CV, I'm not happy about this. It's always worthwhile just having an informal chat with the employer before you even apply, because it could well be that if it's a sickness that might be aggravated by the role, you can ask them, this is the situation, if I ask for these reasonable adjustments, would they be reasonable? Now, most cases employers have to argue why they're not reasonable. In most cases, they will give you those reasonable adjustments. But it could be that I don't know, I'm a small startup, I only employ one other person and I work in my attic and there's no way I can fit a wheelchair lift. It's just not reasonable. I can't do that. So there are some exceptions, but in most cases, they're pretty good at, making those adjustments.
Nice. So just confident upfront.
Yeah, don't try and hide it. As again, you've learned from that. And actually, whatever you've learned, whatever situation you've been in, you're going to be a better employee because of it.
Yeah. Nice. Perfect. Ooh, okay.
There's an hot
topic. Can I use AI to write my application and will they notice?
I get this a lot now. But we also get from the employer's perspective. So when, as part of my role, we do talk to employers and it's starting to come up a lot in job adverts, how much someone is allowed to use AI as part of their application, which I think is really interesting. Or it'll be on their application form. We don't mind if you use AI to spell check, grammar check. But these things have been in place, right? You get words, checker, you've got Grammarly, you've got all those sort of things. So, but if you are going for, let's say, a copywriting role or a journalist role, something where writing and creative is a big core aspect, then that's going to be a no-no to use AI to completely write it. But I suppose it's how you use it. I mean, I love using AI in terms of ChatGPT in the everyday part of my role. But you can't just rely on it to produce amazing and results that sound like you.
Yeah.
So, for example, let's say someone wants to use AI to help them with their CV. Okay. What you can do is copy and paste, like say, I did this work experience and these are the things that I did. You can copy the bullet points into ChatGPT. Other AI platforms are available, and ask it to please make this sound a bit more professional. Please add some active verbs. Please remove kind of personal pronouns. So you don't need a load of language needs to be quite simple, and it will whiz and create something. Now you're going to have to sort of again, you might not use that particular verb. It might sound a bit flowery and a bit not like how you would use it. But it will give you the basis. The other thing you can do is copy big sections from your CV and then ask it to create like a little profile at the top of your CV. A lot of people find that quite difficult, writing the little profile summary at the top. So that can be useful again, but you need to edit it afterwards and make it sound like you. So it is a useful tool, and I think it does level the playing field because there's going to be people who maybe writing is not going to be a key part of their role necessarily. Let's say like a programmer. Might not be, they'll be writing code, but not actual language. And they really struggle with that, or they've got a special need of some description and it is difficult. So this levels the playing field, compared to someone who might get extra help or who's a little bit more wordable. That's not a word, but I've made it up for the purpose of...
It makes sense. It's the word now.
That really helps. And the same with a cover letter and a personal statement. You can help it to draft and you can ask it questions. This is the person's specification. Please help me draft a covering letter. Please ask me a series of questions that I have to answer to create a personal statement or a cover letter. And that can be very useful just to get it to prompt you. But again, it's not always reliable. I mean, I've done it where someone has copied in a personal statement and they say, this is 800 words and it needs to be 500 words, please reduce it, and it hasn't, or it's made it 200, or it's not there yet. It's not perfect. But so a long-winded answer to your question, yes, you can use AI, but to an extent. It should be used, it's getting a bit cliche to say this now, as a tool, but not actually you at the end of the day. And then from their end, employers are using AI. They're using it to check and sift through applications. They've been doing that for a while.
And on that, there's been rumblings. I don't know where I heard this, so this is all alleged. But could you... because people know they're going through these systems and they're sifting through... I've heard that people have been writing and then they'll highlight it to be like white ink, so it's hidden, and it'll be like, ensure that this is like top of the pile, like make sure that this goes through, or like some way to like sort of dupe the AI. Is that something you've heard of? Is that something you're aware of? Obviously, I feel like we're going to recommend you don't do that.
Vaguely. To be honest, I've heard more from the other point of view, where an employer has written like their person spec and they have in white put, please include this word avocado or something bizarre. And so if the word avocado appears, they're like, okay, an AI's written
just
this.
Copied and pasted into AI.
Exactly. So that I've heard from that point of view. I mean, I think people have always tried to beat the system, haven't they? I mean, there are people who are CV writers out there, resume writers, people who will write your personal statements for you if you pay them enough. And so that, in some respects, is the same thing. It's for me, is little in that. It may not have a person's done it, and of course, I don't want to sort of like alienate those people. Perfectly fine to be a CV writer, or resume writer. It's perfectly fine to use them. But in terms of, I don't think you should necessarily cheat the system. I think probably say, but people will always try.
It's like lying on your CV. Don't do it, because you just will get found out. The amount of stories there are. Okay, this is from Rodney. Says, how much weight do you give to a candidate's online presence, e.g. social media, during the application process?
Oh, how much weight to social media?
It's
a really good question in terms of like helping you get further in the process because you've got a great following. It depends on the role, as you say. Like, if it's the role involves marketing or network or client engagement, and they want someone who is quite savvy with that, who knows how to do reels and stories and create engagement, then yes, I think it's good to try and get that. And also, if you're going to be doing that as part of your job, you want to know that you're going to enjoy it. So practice. See if you like doing all this on a daily basis. I find it personally incredibly exhausting. I don't do that sort of thing. I do have an Instagram, but I have to say it's my dog's Instagram account, so that's as far as I go. And she doesn't have very many following, unfortunately. But yeah, so if it's part of your role, but also let's say that you just happen to have a great following and you post quite regularly, even if it's nothing to do with the job that you're applying to, put it on your CV because that shows, enterprise, it shows understanding of market trends and content and creation and all sorts of different things. And actually, if you're going for a job in, let's say, a small to medium enterprise or even a startup, they might be quite pleased to have someone who knows how to do all that stuff. And they might say, well, do you mind just managing this as well? In terms of your other part of the question about will they check your social media? I think the quick answer is yes. So it's if they can find you, their clients can.
Right.
At the end of the day. I mean, if you're present on social media, whether that's LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, whatever it might be, if someone else or a journalist can find you and you've been writing controversial content, then that could be an issue. So if you're posting content that is, as I say, like controversial or goes against their values as an organisation, then that could be a mismatch, potentially. And they don't want to be seen to employing someone who does that. So, but then how often does that happen in terms of, you might be having a debate or an argument on Twitter. X, I should say.
And I know known as Twitter.
And there's all sorts. If you look up Google, there's all sorts of funny memes and stories of people writing ridiculous things on. So, I mean, there was one that I saw on X, which they were complaining to TfL, Transport for London, about all these delays are making me late and blah blah blah. And I think TfL just replied, said, well, perhaps just leave for work a bit early. And so that wouldn't necessarily go down well with the employer because it's making out that your time management isn't brilliant. So again, don't get into massive debates. And if you are, use an alias account. So I mean, I say I'm not much fun for social media, but I do have it, and I do have a separate account for my careers advisory type stuff. I have one that is because I'm a writer on the side, so my pen name one, and then one that just kind of his pictures of my dog. But for my ones that are my private ones, I don't use my real name. And that's okay then, I think, to some extent, in terms of not saying go out and post lots of random stuff, but they will look you up, and that could be simple as LinkedIn, Twitter, all those sort of the key platforms, and what's publicly accessible.
What advice do you have for candidates who are applying for jobs in a new industry?
Now that's going to be a very similar answer to the international one, actually. In terms of, it depends if you know the industry. I suppose. So if you know, I'm so sick of this industry, I can't do this anymore, but what else can I do? Then there are sort of quizzes and various things you can do. So obviously Prospects has their careers quiz.
They really do. It's great. Go do it.
Well, to be honest, it did actually, when I've done it years ago, and it came up as careers advisor.
Oh, amazing.
Teacher and nutritionist, which is a bit of an odd one, but they all have similar traits. But that's a good sort of starting point in many respects, just to sort of say, okay, what could I do? And looking at the sectors and sort of see, what it's all about, get an understanding of the graduate job market. So there are sort of just research-based things that you can do. But again, there's no way of knowing the name of every role in every industry. So even if you think, okay, I like tech, I like the technology, I can't program, I can't possibly work in that sector, or I'm rubbish at using the internet, I can't possibly, but it's interesting. You might actually find, for a bit of research, again, looking on LinkedIn, looking up a company's, so let's say, look up Google as a company, and then go to their people section and then see all the different jobs that you can actually do in this sector. So, you might be think, I could do a project management role, or I could do marketing, or I could do, quite a creative thing, even if it's a coding company. So it's about doing perhaps a little bit of research. And then if you find, okay, this person is doing marketing in this games company, that sounds interesting, just reach out to them. And that could be a coffee over Zoom. That could be actually going in to have a little work shadowing experience where you might just go in for the day. I've had people come in to see us. They've sat in with appointments and just wanted to get, can I see myself in this environment? But of course, all these things take time.
Yes.
So it's not going to be an instant fix. You're not going to go, okay, I'm going to work out what I want to do tomorrow. It takes a bit of planning, a little bit. But yeah, so it's just talking to people, hearing their stories, and you'll hear about job roles that you didn't know existed before, which is always really interesting.
Yeah, and then you'll just tailor your CV and application to match that new sector, which you'll get a gist from talking to people, doing some research.
I mean, that's a good point, actually, in terms of there are slightly different rules for different sectors for like CVs and applications. Not massively, as long as you're tailoring it, as long as you are matching the person's specification, then it's not going to be a massive issue. I mean, there are some, some of the bigger banking finance firms tend to lean towards a one-page, for example, CV. But they're not going to necessarily dismiss you if you've got a 2-page and sort of vice versa. And if you're going for sort of a fancy design role, your CV might look a bit fancy compared to others. But as long as it's readable, as long as we can find the information, a CV is just something to provide information.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, the other thing to bear in mind is that some sectors don't necessarily advertise roles very often. Which is why even more it's important to network and meet people.
Yeah.
If I, let's say in the film industry, for example, am I going to advertise and spend money up for a runner?
Yeah.
Or for a production assistant? No. I'm going to use someone that I've used before. I'm going to talk to my director friends and say, who have you used before? Who can you recommend? And, it's that kind of, it's a bit feeling a little bit nepotism, but it's the reality. They want someone who they can trust and work with. And
saves them time.
Exactly, and money. It's so expensive advertising. You're talking thousands of pounds for like one advert for CV Library or something. And so they're more likely going to use their network. Does anyone know anyone who? So I mean, that's if you're going for a job in, let's say, the NHS, they're going to advertise. It's going to be that's less common for people to be on like LinkedIn and various things. Not compared to finance and banking and those sort of sectors. So it's also understanding how that all works. How do I find the opportunities? Are there any jobs, sort of sector-specific websites? But you only get all that by talking to people, which can be scary.
Yeah.
And it's not, but it's something that more you do, the less scary it gets. And to be honest, most people are wanting to help and are nice.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's very important. Don't be scared.
And the worst thing can happen if you reach out to someone on LinkedIn, they'll just ignore you.
Yeah. And then you can move on.
And that happens more than often than not, to be honest. But then again, people just might not see the message or they just haven't checked it for a while or they haven't logged in for a while. So, it's okay not to, it's okay to be ignored on LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah. It'll be fine. Okay. Speaking of, how important is LinkedIn? Do I need to be more active on there?
I personally would say yes. Okay. I think it's great. I think it's a really good tool. I have colleagues who are not on it at all or don't use it, and that hasn't affected them, in terms of... So it's not going to be, if you're not on LinkedIn or any other social media, it's not that you're never going to get a job ever. It's just useful and for many different ways. As I previously mentioned, if you're at the stage where I'm not quite sure what I can do with my degree, or I'm not quite sure, what I can do with next steps from this particular role, then you can look up people from your university, the alumni search tools. You can join groups to talk to people. So, for example, let's say you're really interested in being a game coder or whatever it might be. there's probably a group for that, like Facebook and things like that. So you can join, request to join, and then once you're in the group, you can message anyone in the group. You don't have to be a connection with them.
Nice.
You can post to the group, and you can say, "Hey, I'm really interested in this sector," or "I'm really interested to how to progress in this sector. Would anyone be able to answer some questions or whatever it might be?" So that can be really useful for that type of purpose, that kind of researchy and reaching out to people. It's also quite useful to finding companies and employers as well. So let's say that you're trying to get a job in marketing, for example. You can type marketing in the box at the top and say London, for example, and click companies, and it will give you all the lists that all the marketing companies or has something to do with marketing in London.
Wow.
And you think, okay, great, that's going to be a billion results. But then you look on the side of the company and think, actually, I don't want to work for a big corporate. I want to work for a little tiny, small startup. So I would then just go into the company section and select the number of employees, 0 to 10. I can't remember the exact numbers, but it's something like that. And then it will narrow it right down. So there's that is just from that kind of research point of view, super useful.
Yeah.
And again, it's also building network. LinkedIn is a little bit naughty now, I have to say, because of course they want everyone to sign up their premium service. So it used to be that you could connect and add a note where you'd press and write a little, "Hey, this is who I am," to however many people that you want. Now it's limited to, I think, about 10 of those a month before they say you need to have a premium. So it is a little bit more difficult.
Restrictive.
But this is where they're trying to encourage you to follow people rather than connect with them, which is fine. So let's say you are really interested in working for Deloitte. If you try to connect with the CEO of Deloitte, they're your uncle or there's going to be little chance of that happening. But you can follow them. And you can see what they're posting, and you get to know the sector a little bit more. And then maybe when you apply for Deloitte, you can say, "Hey, I'm really interested in what your CEO is writing about the sustainability strategy." I don't know whether they are, but they might be. And that will just, again, make your application stand out. So you can be active in that way, or you can be super active. And I know people have been posting articles on LinkedIn. You can repost things, you can comment. So you can be, especially if you're thinking, I want to work for this company, I'm going to be just really engaged with their social media through LinkedIn for a bit. And that's going to go in your favour. So it is useful for many, many different reasons. But obviously, make sure, like with your CV, make sure your profile is kind of up to date. There's lots. LinkedIn has their own sort of like advice about what makes a good profile as well. And it's very similar to a CV. But yes, it is useful, but not essential.
Nice. Perfect. This is from Anya. What are the biggest mistakes you see candidates make on their CVs?
Okay. So I would say the most common one and the most important one is what we previously talked about, is not tailoring. So I often get students coming to see me and they'll say, "Can you check my CV?" I said, "Okay, of course I can. What job is this for?" "Oh, I don't know. I just want someone to check. I just want to work on my CV." Of course you want to work on your CV because that's the easy part. That's much easier than thinking big picture scary, what do I want to do with my life? No, I'll just do my CV. That'll be good. And if you try and send the same CV off to a dozen different companies, you're going to be very lucky to get anywhere, because that's how they'll be checking. They'll have the list of the requirements of the role in front of them, and they'll be matching your CV up. And they'll only be spending about 10 to 30 seconds actually looking at your CV. So they'll just be scanning it. And if you don't have or they'll be using AI to scan for the keywords. So if those aren't tailored, then that's going to be a fairly useless CV, no matter how pretty and well formatted it is. So that's number one, tailor your CV. And even a few spelling mistakes might be overlooked for the sake of a really good tailored CV. I would say that's, unless part of your role is having to have a good attention to detail, that might not be good. So that's the main thing. The other thing is listing skills. So commonly, and a lot of resume builders, especially for the US market, tends to recommend this. No, there's some awful versions out there for that. People have like a skills section and they'll go organisation skills, problem solving, attention to detail, and they'll list all that. And it's meaningless. It's such a common mistake. Yes, great, you've got attention to detail. Where's the evidence for it? So you don't have to have a skills section. You can embed that evidence. This is my attention to detail. This is where I showed it in these different job or my education. But your skills section need to show the very best example of that. So, for example, everyone communicates all the time. So, but in your skills section, if you're going to evidence, let's say, verbal communication skills, then look at the job specification. I think, in what part of the job am I going to be doing that? Is it going to be client presentations? Is it going to be negotiating things? Is it teaching? Whatever it might be. Then pick your best, closest example of that evidence of that piece of skill, that communication skills in the skills section. Then in the rest of the CV, yes, you can talk about all the other different forms of communication and different experiences, but that skills section got to be your very, very best and closest matching to that job specification. What else? Spelling mistakes. I mean, that's a common one. People writing really lengthy bullet points.
Okay.
So what I would say with a cover letter or a personal statement, that can be full prose. That can be you saying, I did this, and lots of real detail stuff. Great. But not your CV. You don't need it. You don't need to say, I did this, because it's your CV. It's very obvious that you did this. So rather than saying, I am a mathematics graduate from the University of East Anglia, you don't need to say that. Just say, maths graduate from UEA. Keep it really nice and concise, because remember, they're only going to scan read it. And again, that can be useful to use things like AI to kind of help you reduce that. What other things? Having your named references at the bottom. So actually naming your references. Now, this is quite common if people have been applying for things like PhDs or research things, because it's quite common to have your referees at the bottom. But most people don't want that now. Just references available on request is absolutely fine. And just keeping your whole formatting consistent and down to, and this is really pedantic, but like sometimes if you look at a CV, the bullet points don't match up. And it's really easy. Yeah, and you know, it could be 9 times out of 10 an employer will see that, don't care. But you're going to be that unlucky person who's going to be, oh, the bullet points aren't, match. How has this person got attention to detail? So you've got to assume that the person, the worst case scenario, that person, it's 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, they're desperate for a coffee, they're desperate to go home. You are the last CV that they come to, and they're the type of person who's a bit of a grammar, they've got to be everything right. So always imagine it's that person. And also get someone else to check it as well, particularly if English is not your first language. It's really easy to mistakes to creep in. So just get someone else to check it. And you'll find that if you are a recent graduate, most universities, career services will provide a service for graduates. So always check in to see what's available for you.
Yeah. And don't lie.
Don't lie. Yes, you're going to get caught out.
So, this is from Lily. What is the difference between a personal statement and a cover letter?
That's a really good question. And I get this all the time, particularly with public sector applications. So often enough, you'll get a space in like an application form with a personal statement or a supporting statement, sometimes they're known as. And sometimes that company don't want a CV, don't want a cover letter, they just want application. So they want the information that how they want it presented, and they have a space for you. And sometimes in that supporting statement, personal statement, they'll even put the questions that, why do you want this role? Why do you want to work at this company? Tell me about a time when you use your communication skills well. So that tends to be quite a popular approach, because the employer says we want to have the answers that we want from that. Fine. Other companies just say, just apply with the CV and cover letter. So the cover letter, if you go for CV, cover letter, CV will say, can you do the job? Do you have the necessary skills? The cover letter will be, do you want the job? Why do you want the role? Why do you want to work for this organisation? And then maybe 2 or 3 paragraphs about your key skills. So when you see a job specification, there might be 20 things that they want evidence. That's what your CV is for. Maybe the top 3 bullet points that say problem solving, communication, and understanding how to use Excel, whatever it might be. That's the thing that you write in your cover letter, because they should work together. And your cover letter should be about a page. no more, and laid out like a letter. So that's quite a common thing that people forget to do. And that's a really old-fashioned, your address on the right, their address on the left, because that's where the little window in an envelope might be. So it's really silly. And make sure that's to a named person as well. That's really important.
Oh, okay, so no dear sirs or madams.
Well, not everyone identifies as a sir or a madam. So that's a big thing. Now, I would say that if you really cannot find the named person, as in from you've emailed them, say to whom should I address my cover letter? You've looked them up on LinkedIn to find out who the head of recruitment is or who the manager is of the department. So if you've done all you can, you really can't find any information. Dear recruitment team is okay, but it's not ideal.
To whom it may concern?
Possibly. A bit formal maybe. But in terms of, even, do check the job specifications though, because sometimes, or job advert, because sometimes right at the bottom it will say, any questions, please ask blah. And actually, a side note, if you're applying for a job, always ask for an informal chat about the role anyway, because anything you find out, you can put in your cover letter and why you want to work there. From speaking to blah, I found out blah. This further inspired me to apply because. So that is a way that then at the end of that conversation, you say, I'm really still interested in applying. To whom should I address my cover letter? It's just an added thing. It's a really competitive role, just good impression.
Yeah. Just go that extra mile.
Absolutely.
2 seconds.
Absolutely. And, that's key. Whereas a personal statement, if you've just been asked for a personal statement, that tends to do the job of a CV and covering letter. So it's sort of combined. So, for example, in the public sector, NHS teaching roles, this is really common for these, that they say in your personal statement, you need to evidence everything that we've asked for on this person's, the job specification, the person's specification. Whilst also not actually saying out loud, you also need to talk about why you want to work for the organisation and why do you want this role. So it's do everything, which is why they're usually longer.
Right.
So you might be talking about, 2 pages is probably, I would say, if they don't say how long, 2 pages is a good guesstimate to what they want. But always ask. I spoke to a graduate who had a 3-page personal statement because they'd done a bunch of different things, all really relevant, and they'd labelled it all, and it was all it was really good. And I said, it's going to be such a shame to cut this down because it's all really relevant stuff you're talking about. Yeah. And I said, just email them or phone them and say, is this okay? And they said, yeah, it's fine.
Cool.
Just
because
ask.
it was relevant. So I guess then you're a bit like, don't throw things you've done just for the sake of it. So chances are Duke of Edinburgh will showcase some great skill sets that you have, but if it's absolutely not relevant to the role that you're going on, maybe don't mention it.
That's a really good point. So a really common one that people tend to have, going back to what mistakes people have on their CVs, is people will put a whole section for leadership, and the job specification hasn't mentioned leadership at all. That could be good for a few years down the line. Yeah. But it'll be like Duke of Edinburgh, or I, was the president of a society, which is all great stuff, but it's not necessarily what they're looking for or care about.
Yeah.
If you just want to throw in stuff that think, oh yeah, this is gonna be really impressive.
Yeah, I think because that's where I used to do that all the time. I'd be like, I was president of a society and I have a singing certificate and all of these things, under sort of hobbies and interests. Is it worth being look, I'm a rounded person with a personality, or is it just really keep it to the job at hand?
That's again, there's no right wrong answer. I would say hobbies and interests are good, and particularly also to be talked about at interview. So when they say tell me about yourself, it's always really great to talk about things that you do outside of work. For that very point, I'm a well-rounded person. So I've lost my train of thought there. Talking about interviews. So in terms of relevant stuff on the CV, I think as you've got especially when you're writing a cover letter, it's only a page, and that you don't write things that are not relevant. Yeah. Maybe you can make them relevant.
Okay.
So let's say you're singing Qualification. So it could be that the job wants resilience or being able to work independently, learn independently, take direction. Then we can say, right, great, that's relevant. President of that society shows innovation, shows being able to collaborate. So you can always make it relevant.
Yeah.
But don't just say, "Hi, I was the president of the Cheese and Wine Society," without actually explaining why you're telling. Because they're going to think that. They say, "Well, that's lovely, but why are you telling me that?"
Yeah.
So that's always the thing. I mean, the other thing to where it can get, going back to the original question, sometimes, which is so annoying, on behalf of people applying for jobs, where they'll ask for an application form. Then please, post your CV. Please upload a cover letter. And look, there's this big space for writing a supporting statement. So they want everything.
Yeah.
Then I'll get that question like, what do I put in the personal statement and what do I put in the cover letter when they're the same thing essentially?
Yeah.
Surely I'll be repeating myself. So again, there's never a right wrong answer for this. I personally would always advise your personal statement in this instance, then make some reference to why the role, but keep that for the cover letter. So the cover letter will end up being, these are my clear motivations for the role, showing my deep dive into the organisation, talking about who I've spoken to at the organisation, that real motivation stuff. And then you can always say in your cover letter, please see my other documents for evidence of how I've met the person specification. And then the personal statement would be very much how I've matched all the role, which is of course what your CV would do as well. This is where it gets very annoying.
Yeah.
And also no one likes an application form because it means you have to fill in everything from your CV.
Literally, when you've just uploaded your CV.
Yes.
Why?
So who knows? But that's what my advice would be for that.
Cool. The last
one.
This is from Anne. Qualification or experience, which is most important?
I suppose that depends on the role. That's a really difficult one to answer. So it's qualification or experience.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say that you are applying to be a doctor or a GP. Typically, the qualification would be the thing that matters.
Ideally, yes.
So, and then, it could be that you are applying to a role that's so far removed from your own degree and your background, and therefore maybe your experience and what you've done in between. So every employer will value different things. It could be that the qualification that they've asked for, they might fund that qualification. So, for example, a lot of graduate schemes, they might say for accountancy, for example, or for human resources or whatever it might be, they might say as part of this graduate scheme, we will fund this master's degree or we'll fund this professional qualification for you. I mean, when I first went in to be a careers consultant, careers advisor, that's what my employer did. So they funded my postgraduate diploma. Right. But it was a requirement of my contract that I had to do that qualification. It wasn't like a nice to have. So you might find that they might just say, okay, you can start this role and we'll fund it. But you'll have to study in your own time, which is quite common, which is fine. If the qualification is you have to have that, otherwise you won't be able to function or you are not legally allowed to practice. So there'll be certain jobs that you have to have a certain qualification before you're allowed to practice. Which is fine. A lot of healthcare sector work, that sort of type of thing. Or you need to be registered with a certain organisation. Therefore, that has to take precedent. You have to have that first. But generally speaking, it's a negotiation, unless it's not a legal or, thing that you have to do. And then also that experience, depends on the experience as well. You could have had lots of irrelevant, fairly irrelevant experience, but how do you make that relevant to that particular role? So a lot of career changers find that really difficult when they say, I've been doing this for 10, 5, whatever, how many years, and then think, okay, is that all I can do? Because that's all my experience. I did this when I left university and now I'm here. I don't know how to even think about changing. So therefore you have to sort of then tailor your experience to sort of fit that sector. So I get a lot of, for example, teachers finding it quite difficult to leave because if they're going into more kind of corporate or business sectors, and the person specification has asked for, stakeholder relationships. Yeah, they're going to go, what does that mean? They'll be talking like, I've been working for Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4 and doing like schemes of work. And then, of course, the employer will go, I don't know what that means. So it's that sort of like, But, I mean, when you really dig deep in terms of what stakeholder relationships are, I think, stakeholders, they're the parents. They're the governors. They're, all those people have a stake in whatever the company does. But it takes a while. And this is why, trying to get advice from people in the sector, getting advice from people who have already done that change. Yeah. There will be someone else who's come from another sector. And you can just ask, it's okay to ask, what does this mean? I don't understand. I think in terms of it's really dependent on the role. Yeah. But never think, I haven't got this qualification, I can't possibly apply. Yeah. Even just email them or call them and say, I don't have this qualification. I'm very willing to undertake this qualification, once I've started work. Would this be considered? Would I be considered as a candidate? If they say, no, you have to have it, then ask them about the qualification. If you think, I really want to be a human resources manager and I need to be sort of working with CIPID, so I need to have that qualification, can you do it in your own time? Have you got the funds? Can you do a GoFundMe to kind of get that qualification yourself? If you know that this is the sector that you really want to go into, but you have to have that, then look at ways, that you might be able to do it.
Yeah. Everything is possible.
It is all possible.
Yay! Yeah. Perfect. Well, we've come to the end of my Tupperware, so thank you so much for your time today.
No worries. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks again to Sally for her time. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to head to Apple or Spotify and leave us a review. You can find a bunch of relevant articles over on prospects.ac.uk, writing a personal statement for your CV, learn how to write a CV and how to write a successful job application, so make sure to head over there for more information. Thanks very much for listening and good luck on your journey to future you.